Hey guys, so we are going to start in with the central nervous system. So the first thing we're going to do are the external structures of the brain. So come look at my sheep brain. So all of this white stuff along the outside is the dura mater. Now as you start to kind of cut this stuff away, there will probably be a few places that you can kind of start to see a little bit of the arachnoid mater, which will look very web-like, and the pia mater is actually completely up on top of this surface of the brain, so you really won't be able to peel it off. However, when we start cutting the brain, and if you start kind of peeling some things apart, you may be able to kind of distinguish the pia mater here and there. If you actually take the tip of your scissors and you put it into one of the little grooves, you might be able to pull up just a teeny tiny bit. Nonetheless, here is the brain. The very first thing that I'm going to do actually is to cut away a lot of this dura mater, because if I don't cut it away I won't be able to see much. And I'm going to do that very carefully with my scissors. So there's already a piece of this. This is how my brain came, and so I can just start kind of peeling this back a little bit. So as I do this, I'm just going to be very careful, especially on the ventral aspect of the brain, not to remove any of the cranial nerves. So as you are lifting, you can see that some of these nerves are poking through this dura mater. So just to be very, very cautious as you are cutting this away. So I'm actually going to go back to the dorsal aspect of the brain and start cutting away from the top. Now as I am lifting this up, you can actually see that there's a very stiff ridge of the dura mater where it's fused together between the two hemispheres, sitting down in that longitudinal fissure. So that's very similar to our dural septa. So this would be pretty much the same thing as our superior sagittal sinus right there. And as you lift it up, you can actually see the blood that is present within that superior sagittal sinus, exactly like it is in the human brain. I'm going to cut this in half. Start making my way down the lateral aspect of the brain here. Okay, and I'm going to just cut along this very thin portion. All right. So I've got a nice chunk of this dura mater cut away. Okay. And this is going to allow me to see the entire cerebrum. So remember, there's the cerebrum and then there's the cerebellum. The cerebellum is still completely covered in that dura mater. Now when we look at, there's the longitudinal fissure, the very large groove separating the right hemisphere from the left hemisphere. We can also see that these are the frontal lobes. If you look very closely, this black line right here is actually representing my central sulcus on this structure. So let me point to it with my sharp probe here. All the way along there is my central sulcus, and it goes all the way down. That is separating my frontal lobes from my parietal lobes. And then at the very tip of the frontal lobes, we call that the frontal pole. At the very back of the occipital lobes, we call that the occipital pole. And along the lateral aspect here, we can see this little, it doesn't look nearly as distinct as a human, but this is part of the temporal lobe down here. And so this would be the equivalent of the temporal pole of the temporal lobe.